Where is
Zone Wars Purgatory tutorial?
Wait. Who are you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let me put it in a language you can understand.
Purgatory is a pretty cool map made by spankysully where when you die you're transported to another dimension where you can box fight, or entertain yourself in other ways. I'm gonna show you how to make a map like this, but I warn you, things are gonna get a little bit greasy in the process and you might end up completely lost if you try to skip through this video at any point, so I urge you to follow along and do everything in the order shown up until the optional steps. Now before we go full insertion on a map like this and start building our areas out, there are some things you need to consider before starting. Your Purgatory area needs to be completely out of the way of your Zone Wars storms since both areas will have their own storm controllers. They cannot intersect with each other or bad things will probably happen. With that being said, I'm deliberately placing my Purgatory in the top corner of this map, as away from everything else as I can get. Let's build our Purgatory area. The easiest way would be to build a tower structure with multiple floors. We're only going to build the first 2 floors right now, the first floor being our island start, where you can just place 16 spawn pads, and on all of them, set visibility to off. And the second floor being our Purgatory hub, where players decide where to go once they end up here, but don't put anything here just yet, we'll just keep in mind what this area is for later. Really quickly before continuing, go to your island settings, set the player spawns to infinite, scroll down and set last standing ends game to off. We're only going to make 4 spawns to start, but once we have everything working, you can place in the rest of the spawns, all the way up to 16 of them. I suggest doing it this way so you can make sure you have things working right before you put in the real time and effort of fleshing things out for 16 players. So for our Zone Wars area, each spawn uses its own spawn pad and barrier. I basically just make a 1x1 box that the player spawns on, and I put the barrier inside as shown. Now your spawn pad settings for each player spawn will need to be priority group primary, visible in-game no, and set disable when receiving from channel 8. Because we don't want any chance of our players respawning in the Zone Wars area, we want to turn these off when we're done using them. Now going inside the player's spawn base, we can place the barrier directly underneath the player. We want to make sure this is set to box hollow, and disable when receiving from channel 2. I like to have a maintenance room for these sort of things, so I'm going to build one out of sight to hold a lot of devices later on and keep things organized. Once you've done that, place a timer inside and set the duration to 10 seconds, auto start on, complete once yes, show trigger no, turn off alarm audio, and set when complete transmit channel 2. This allows the barriers to stay up for 10 seconds before they are turned off by the signal. If you want it to be a different amount of time, just set the timer to something different. Now place another timer and set this one up to only have a 2-second delay. Auto start on, complete once yes, show trigger no, and set when complete transmit channel 8. We'll be using this one to turn on our Mutator zone, which we'll be setting up soon. Now let's look at our Zone Wars area and figure out where the center of it would be. For this tutorial, I'm going to place a barrier that encloses the Zone Wars area, and it's also going to give it a cool space aesthetic. You don't have to do this, but I strongly recommend you do, as it fully prevents players from leaving the area, therefore completely preventing game-breaking bugs that your players could cause by leaving the zones. Place a hover platform, build a few floors on it, and on the bottom of one, place a barrier. Set the style to whatever you want, zone shape to box hollow, set the barrier height to 100, and set the width and depth so that it covers your entire Zone Wars area but doesn't disturb the Purgatory area. Now that we have that there, we can place a Mutator zone next to it, facing down the same way as the barrier. Go into the settings, set allow building and weapon fire both to yes, set the height to 100, make sure the zone's width and depth are big enough so it covers all of your players' spawns, and set enabled at game start to no. Then set enable when receiving to channel 8, disable when receiving to channel 2, and we'll also set on player entering zone, transmit channel 5. While we're up here, place another mutator zone facing down, and on this one make sure to set allow weapon fire and building both to yes, set the height to 100, and pretty much set the depth and width to the same as your other mutator zone. Just make sure it gets the whole Zone Wars area without disturbing the Purgatory. Then scroll down and set on player leaving zone, transmit channel 6. This will be used to keep track of when players are killed in the Zone Wars area. Now that that's done, go back to the maintenance room you built, where your timers are, and place a class designer device and a class selector device. In the class designer, you can name it to something like Zone Wars, set the class identifier to 4, and grant ammo with weapons to no. Now in the class selector, set class to switch to 4, time to switch 2 seconds, restore health and shields no, and change player to class when receiving channel 5. You can use an advanced storm controller if you want, it doesn't harm anything, but for this video we're going to use a basic storm controller for our Zone Wars area. Rotate it so the satellite on it is pointing the direction you want the storm to go, and place it. We can set it to generate on game start, set the initial radius to a size that allows your players just a bit of room around them, using the pink ring around the controller as a reference, and set the end radius to 0. The wait time is how long it will be before the storm actually starts moving, so we can turn this to about 10 seconds. The resize time is how long the storm will take to go from this big to this big. I set mine to 2 minutes for this map. We can leave damage at 10%, or you can turn it down if you're a total goober. Our minimum distance is basically how far the storm will set its end location at the very least, and our maximum is the same thing but at the furthest. And the controller will randomly decide a location between these distances for the storm to move to. The move time is how long it takes for the storm to center itself over the final location it's decided to go to. If you have a really slow resize time, but a really fast move time, the storm will get to the final area quickly while staying pretty big, and then shrink down as the resize time continues counting down. Or having a fast resize time and a slow move time will just shrink the storm quickly while it slowly inches to its end location, although it probably will have completely shrunk and disappeared by that time. I recommend playing with these settings to get a perfect feel for your map and intended difficulty. Now in the hub area, start by placing around 6 to 9 spawn pads, and on each of them set enable during phase to gameplay only, priority group secondary, island start invisible during games to no, and when player spawned transmit channel 10. Now in your maintenance room or out of the way somewhere, place a class designer and a class selector device. In the class designer settings, you can name your class to something like Purgatory Hub, set class identifier to 10, scroll down and set starting health to 100%, max health to 1, starting shields to 100%, max shields to 10,000, and then set the movement multiplier to 2. Then scroll down a little more and set allow building to none. Now going over to our class selector device, set class to switch to 10, time to switch instant, clear all items on switch, and change player to class when receiving channel 10. Now we want our entire Purgatory area to be unaffected by the storm from our Zone Wars area, and all we need to do to achieve that is place a basic storm controller either at the bottom or at the top, anywhere in the Purgatory structure. It just needs to be in the center. In the settings, leave generate storm on game start to yes, set the initial radius so your storm fully fits your Purgatory area inside of it, set your wait time and resize time to their maximum, set move time to the maximum, and that's it. Your Purgatory is safe from the other storm as long as it's inside of this one. Although sometimes the first player that goes to Purgatory might take storm damage. It's very rare, but it may occur. They'll just die to storm and then respawn in Purgatory again, and they shouldn't be taking storm damage after that. Now we have two areas that work in game, but we don't have a working game yet. The Zone Wars won't actually end on its own because player spawns are set to infinite and last standing ends game is off anyways. So we have to tell the game when it's time to end the round, once there's only one remaining player in the Zone Wars area. There are several ways to approach this. Some are very complicated but do have their benefits, and there are also a few different very simple ways of doing it as well. I'm going to show you a simple way of doing this, but the original Purgatory creator himself, spankysully, has his own tutorial map on how to count players and even integrates an accurate placement system into the map, but do be aware that it uses 24 channels. Now for the method we're doing today, we're going to place a tracker device, set stat to track to channel, and set target value to 0. We'll be increasing this value by how many players are counted at the beginning of the round. Set assign on game start to no, set sharing to all, and set target class to 4, so it only tracks activity from our Zone Wars players. Make sure amount to increment on received signal is set to 1. Set show on HUD to yes for now. You can turn it off later if you want, we just need to know if it's counting our players correctly. Set completion ceremony to no. Increment progress when receiving channel 6. Assign when receiving channel 5. Remove when receiving channel 10. Increase target value when receiving channel 5. Decrease target value when receiving channel 4. And when complete, transmit on channel 3. I'll explain what all of this is for in a moment, but first we're going to need to place a trigger device and set times can trigger to 1, trigger when receiving from channel 5, and when triggered, transmit channel 4. And then really quick, place a round settings device, scroll all the way down in the settings and set end round when receiving from channel 3. Now let's go over what's happening here. When the Mutator zone covering our Zone Wars area turns on and detects players entering the zone, it sends a signal for each player which is received by our tracker device and increases its target value accordingly. So if there are 8 players in our Zone Wars area when the round starts, the tracker's value will be set to 8. Then every time a player dies in our Zone Wars area, the tracker increments until the incremented value matches the target value. But that would mean 8 players would have to die to complete the tracker, which we have set to end the round on completion. That doesn't work because we need to have 1 player left. Zone Wars is a last man standing game, so we need 1 last player standing. If we have 8 players, we only need 7 to die to end the round. So we need a -1 on that tracker's target value after it's received a player count. That's what the trigger next to the tracker is for. It only transmits its signal once, and we use it to decrease the target value so only 7 players need to die, or 1 less than the total amount of players, depending on how many you have. And once we've done this, we've basically set up the foundation of a Purgatory map. Where we go from here is just speccing out the additional content, the DLC if you will. Even though I'm going to show you how to recreate some things from the original Purgatory map by spankysully, I urge you guys to be creative and try to come up with your own ideas and plot twists on this map, especially if you plan on publishing it. To add randomized loot to our Zone Wars area, you can start by placing an item granter. Go into the settings and set receiving players to triggering player. On grant action, keep all. grant current item, grant condition only if space, grant on cycle yes, give extra ammo no, cycle behavior wrap, and set cycle to random item when receiving from channel 5. This will grant a random item out of the item granter when receiving that signal. Go ahead and copy this so you can save the same settings and paste it until you have 6 granters in total. And then go back to the first one and only drop shotguns in it. Drop all the different types you want available to your players onto this item granter. Don't worry about ammo, once you're done just move on to the next item granter. In this one we're only going to drop SMGs in it, all the ones we want available. Then move on to the next one, drop ARs in that. The one after that can be items like snipers, hunting rifles, rocket launchers, etc. You can really put whatever mixture of items you want into it. And then the next one after that can actually be dedicated to healing items like slurpfish, floppers, medkits, minis, etc. And then the very last item granter will be used to grant ammo and mats. So drop the ammo and mats you want your players to have onto it, and then go into the settings and set grant all items, grant condition always, and instead of using cycle to random item, we'll use grant item when receiving channel 5. Now your players will get a randomized weapon loadout at the beginning of every round. Now let's make it where our players in Purgatory have the option to just spectate Zone Wars players the default way. In my Purgatory hub, I made a little room that's 2 tiles long as shown. Walk to the end of the room and on the bottom, place a Mutator zone. Set zone depth to 2 or width, depending on which way you've placed it. You just want it to stick out a little more this way towards the opening of the room. And set on player entering zone, transmit channel 11. Now directly above this Mutator zone, place a damage volume. Set zone depth or width to 2 to match the Mutator zone. Set the damage type to damage over time, damage to 150, damage tick rate to 1 second, and shield damage off. Now in our maintenance room or off to the side somewhere, place a class designer device and a class selector device. In the class designer, you can name it to something like Default Spectator. Set the class identifier to 5, and scroll down and set the spawn limit to 1. Now in the class selector settings, set class to switch to 5, time to switch instant, restore health and shields on switch no, and change player to class when receiving channel 11. Now when a Purgatory player enters this room, they'll die soon after and go into the default spectator mode. To add the ability to spectate from above, or God Mode Spectate, you can go up to the hover platform that you use for your Zone Wars barrier and Mutator zones, and on top of it, if you have room, go up a level with some walls, place a floor, and then place another barrier. The reason that you have to do this is so you aren't touching the top of the Mutator zones that are counting the Zone Wars players. This is just a precaution to prevent bugs. Once you've placed the barrier, leave this one as invisible, set zone shape to box hollow, set the barrier width and depth to give your spectators plenty of room to move around and watch the fight below, and set the height to 2. Now place a teleporter a bit above the platform the barrier is on. Set teleporter group to group D, set target group to none, set these 4 settings to no, and set when teleported to transmit on channel 12. Now back in our Purgatory hub, build out a 2-tile long open room like this, and place a teleporter device at the end. Set the teleporter group to none, teleporter target group to group D, set these 4 settings to no, but you can leave the rift visible in game if you prefer to do that, and set when entered transmit on channel 13. Now in the maintenance room or off to the side, place a class designer and class selector device. In the class designer, you can name it something like God Mode Spectate or Spectate from above, set class identifier to 1, max health 100, starting shields 100%, max shields 10,000, set movement multiplier to 2, jump fatigue to off, allow item drop no, and allow item pickup no. You can also add a sniper so players can get a closer look at things below, just drop it onto the class designer. Now in the class selector, set class to switch to 1, time to switch instant, restore health and shields on switch yes, and change player to class when receiving channel 13. The original Purgatory has 2 box fight areas where you respawn with a specific weapon order. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to make 1 box fight area. However, if you wanted to do it like the original map, you would just do all of the same things for this box fight area, but using different channels and whatnot. In your Purgatory area, you'll want to build a room about 2 or 3 levels high, however high you want your box fights to be, and try to make it 7x7 or 8x8 tiles in dimension. Once you've done that, build a little room on one side of it for players to use to return to the Purgatory hub. Now, place a teleporter on the edge somewhere, and make sure it's not too close to the floor or else the player might phase through it. Now set teleporter group to group B, teleporter target group to none, and set these 4 settings to no. Now copy this teleporter and place it somewhere else in the room so players have more than 1 entry point. And then grab some player checkpoints and place them underneath the teleporters. And on the checkpoints, be sure to set visible during game to no. Now back in the Purgatory hub area, make a 2 tile long open room like this, and place a teleporter at the end of it. Set the teleporter group to none, teleporter target group to group B, change teleporter target on entry, set these 4 settings to no, and set when entered transmit on channel 17. Now in the maintenance room or off to the side, place a class designer and class selector device. In the class designer, you can name it something like BoxFight Pump AR or whatever weapon order you have. Set the class identifier to 9. Grant items on respawn yes. Max health 100. Movement multiplier 1. Eliminated players' items and resources delete. And allow building to all. Now you can go ahead and drop your box fight weapons and resources onto the class designer, and don't forget to drop ammo for the weapons. Now in the class selector, set class to switch to 9, time to switch instant, clear items on switch all items, and change player to class when receiving channel 17. While we're in the hub area, place another teleporter right where the player spawn pads are. Set teleporter group and target group to none. Set these 4 settings to no. Set teleport to when receiving from channel 18. And when teleported to, transmit channel 10. Now let's go back to our box fight area, and in the little room we put on the side, we can place a billboard above the entrance and have it say something like, "Return to Purgatory." Copy that billboard and inside the room paste it again. Now you'll want to place a button device over the billboard. Set visible during game to no, and when interacted with, transmit channel 18. So when the players use this button, they'll be teleported back to the hub area. Now let's go back to our box fight area, and in the room off to the side we're going to place an elimination manager. This will be used to count the kills that happen in this box fight area, and we can have the builds be destroyed every 7 kills for example. That number is up to you, but do be warned this can use up a lot of channels very quickly. I've limited the amount of times the builds will reset on my map to 6, which I believe is more than enough. So in this elimination manager, set visible during game to off, class identifier to 9, toss items no, and on elimination transmit channel 19. Now place a trigger. I recommend renaming these triggers to easily keep track of which one is which. I'm setting this one to reset 1. Now in the trigger options, set triggered by players, vehicles, and sequencers to off. And if you want your builds to reset every 7 kills, you would set transmit every X triggers to 7. The number itself is up to you. Set these 3 settings to off. Set disable when receiving channel 31. Trigger when receiving channel 19. And when triggered, transmit channel 21. Now before moving on, we'll go out in the center of our box fight area and place an explosive device. Set the blast radius to 5, player damage to 0, structure damage to 300, damage indestructible buildings no, knockback off, play audio and VFX off, visible during game no, collision during games no, show health bar no, play audio no, explode when receiving from channel 21, and when exploded transmit on channel 31. Now go back to the trigger we placed, copy it, and paste the new one above it. You can rename the new one to Reset 2. And since you copy and pasted it, all the settings are saved, so all you need to change is enabled on game start to disabled, enable when receiving from to channel 31, disable when receiving from channel 32, and when triggered, transmit on channel 22. Now go back to the explosive device, copy it, and paste a new one above it. And on the new one, just set explode when receiving to channel 22, and when exploded, transmit channel 32. You'd repeat this process until you have the total amount of resets that you want. I'm putting 6 in my game, so if you want to do that, I'll leave it in the video so you can follow along, but if you know what you're doing at this point, you can skip the rest of this part. To show the number of build resets left in your Boxfight area, place a trigger device. Set triggered by player, vehicles, and sequencers to off. Set transmit every X triggers to the same number you did in the build reset triggers, -7. Turn these three settings off. And set trigger when receiving to channel 19. And when triggered, transmit channel 20. Now place a score manager device. However many resets you made earlier with your explosive devices, that is what you're going to set the score value as. I did 6 in this video, so I'm going to set the score value to 6. Set score award type to set, score increment to -1, minimum score to 0, maximum score to 6, or however many resets you made. Set visible in-game to yes. Disable when receiving channel 26, which is the channel that's transmitted when my last explosive device has exploded, and increment when receiving channel 20. Go to your island settings and in the game tab, set voice chat to all, teams free for all, spawn limit infinite. After last spawn, go to spectator. Total rounds is up to you, mine is set to 10. Team rotation can be turned on every round. I set my time limit to none. If you want a time limit, it is up to you. If you publish your island, I recommend setting one just in case, but make sure it's high enough so the round doesn't end prematurely. Last standing ends game to off. Join in progress to spawn. Allow spectating other teams yes. Now in the settings tab, set starting shields to 100%. Infinite ammo and resources off. Max building resources to 500. Environment damage off. Set structure damage to enemy and self-built. Eliminated players' items drop. Fall damage on. Glider redeploy off. Player names and locations always hide. Health granted on elimination to 50. And you also have the option to grant materials on elimination, that's up to you. Set allow manual respawning to yes. And now in the UI tab, set HUD info type to score. Show cumulative stat on HUD yes. Map screen display to scoreboard. Show cumulative scoreboard yes. And game end callout placement. Then go to your tools tab and press create island backup. This saves your progress and ensures you can always restore the island to this point in time if anything ever gets messed up somehow. If you do have issues you can't figure out on your own, feel free to join my Discord server and ask a question in the Map Mechanics channel. The link to join is in the video description. And that's about it. Thanks for watching. See ya.